Welcome to driving adoption of Splunk in your enterprise. And I'm going to let Chris stand over here, so I may end up sort of turning around a bit like this, so bear with me. Quick question, and everyone, no forward-looking statements, you've seen it before. Just by show of hands, who's heard of FIS? Actually, there's a lot more people than I thought. So those of you that haven't, we're probably the world's largest company that nobody has ever heard of. We've got about 65,000 employees now, about a $43 billion market cap. We process about $9 trillion worth of transactions every year, and no one's ever heard of us. We do a lot of on behalf of processing for banks and financial institutions. In the US alone, we do about 4,000 of the 6,500 banks that are here, but very global company. So today, I'd like to introduce Splunk Advocate. And advocate only because fanatic is probably a little bit too strong. Chris Liddy. Chris is willing to put in the effort and a visionary that people don't always understand.
I'm Chris, as you've just heard, and my best mate, Matt. One of the laziest people I know, but he's also willing to try any new tech if it's going to make his life better and life easier. Okay. We've spent a lot of time developing what we've got in Splunk and really had a lot of fun. I'm super excited to be here, and as I was telling some of the Splunkers over the past couple of weeks, I try and get my day job out of the way early so that I've got a little bit of spare time just so I can go do some playing with Splunk. It's like, great, this is my toy I get to play with when I'm not doing what I'm actually paid for. As part of this, I have to go and speak to a lot of clients. So I go in and tell them about our modernisation plans around our tenured platforms, our improvements of monitoring, reporting, alerting, what we're doing with business analytics and dashboarding. And going in, seeing a lot of clients, they are actually usually fairly impressed by what we've put together. But I put together a little bit of a video about what my life has been like over the last 18 months. Okay, Holy Grail might be a little bit of a stretch, but why let that get in the way of a good story? What I found is going in and doing it, what we did is we went and put in Splunk for one of those initial use cases. We put it in for, you're doing it for IT ops, you're doing it for DevOps, you're doing it for SOC and NOC. And what we found is all of our clients were using it for all of those what I call prescription use cases. They were, what did Splunk sell us it can do? Did it do it? Yes, I've got it. I'm happy with it. When we put it in, we did it for those initial use cases. We were doing it for SLA monitoring. We were doing it for alerting. We were doing it for some advanced analytics. But as we were pushing all of this data in from our core platforms, from our API gateways, from our browser front end, there's so much rich data in those logs that we just had to play with it. And as I said, that's what I've been doing. A lunch break, eating a sandwich with one hand, coding SPL in the other hand, just processing that data and just finding those interesting things about my platforms that I've been working on for 20 years. Finally, I've got a tool that I can play with to find how people are actually using it. How people are moving from screen to screen within the browser. What's the response time when they're initially entering an account number and inquiring on an account? Getting authorization data off the mainframe and actually seeing real-time latency response times, calls into external systems, number of times we call a HSM to validate security data. We've got all of this rich data, and we just started playing with it and started coming up with here's a data element, let me play with it. I've got a merchant description. There isn't usually much you can do other than processing and seeing average transaction amount, maximum transaction amount, number of transactions, total amount by merchant. But finally looking at it and going, actually, I've got a city in there. Let me go and grab the city and go look up the coordinates of that. And now I can play with it and get it as a dashboard and as a visualization. So within mostly, I heard somebody mention in one of the sessions that I went to that I really liked. He called it dashboard porn. Right, I'm putting that in my lexicon because that's really what we've been developing and playing with and getting that stuff and putting it in front of our clients, and they're going, great. You know, we've been doing response times, latencies, average response times, and so on, but we were doing the analytics against the platforms, and that's what really engaged with our clients. So we've put it in as these initial use cases, but then that's what got it in the door, that's what got procurement to buy the software for us, and we've been using it right across a whole heap of extra data that we hadn't had before. So what I saw was we were on one side with the traditional use cases plus a lot of what I call non-prescription uses. And our clients on the other side, you know, sometimes quite a bit bigger than us, are just keeping it in that individual instance. Yeah.
And I guess then, so why? Why are we encountering this massive chasm of difference between what we were doing with it and what we saw a lot of our clients? And remember, our clients are mostly financial institutions and people doing it. And really it was because they were trying to crack a walnut with a sledgehammer. I mean, if you think, and you guys are all, you know, Splunk advocates, or you wouldn't be here. If you think of the vast range of things that you can do with the Splunk software, simply trying to check to see how many transactions happen to be going down a pipe or whether your VMs are up or down is using a tiny fraction of what it can do. All right, so this is my analogy, trying to crack a walnut with a sledgehammer. And I don't think you need a smaller hammer. I think these guys need to be looking for a bigger nut. Okay, so we really need to start thinking about what else can you do. And Chris and his team, and in fact everyone in the organisation now, whenever we're encountering a problem, and it's almost no matter what the problem is, one of the tools in the back of our mind as to how we can fix it, how we can find out what it is, how we can dig down deeper is, can we use Splunk for this? So we built something called OneView, and this is really a single view of data for our clients. And it's not just network and it's not just systems, but it's also where their card holders are spending. It's health checks around not just the systems, but health checks around the portfolio itself. It's spend trends. This is going forward without me. It's spend trends. Customer behaviour in the portfolio. So, I mean, just talking this morning with Chris around what else we could be doing with this, what else we could get going with this, and I'm just going to quickly hit that because there's timings on this that weren't on there before when we submitted it. But thinking about, you know, if a customer transacts and they get declined for fraud, what's the next thing that they do? All right? Do they try the card again? Do they never use the card again? Do they change from when they were using it twice a week to now they're only using it once every month? So starting to look at some of these problems and some of these solutions around exactly how we can find out what's going on within the portfolio. So really taking it to that next level around come on. There we go. I hope this doesn't keep happening. We'll see how we go. And so this is a little dark and hard to see, but tracking where the authorisations are happening throughout the day, how they're spending, but then also looking at, you know, we also had details around how our batch was running. Okay, and we had these peaks in the middle of the day sometimes when there's a huge number of cards got declined, and that's a problem potentially. But it's only a problem if it happens in a certain part of the day. If it happens between two particular batch jobs that run overnight, it's probably because PayPal's trying to hit the 40,000 cards that they try to hit every night that we've told them for the last 7 years in a row have been closed for 7 years, but they still hit you every night and you get a massive set of declines. But that happens at a different time every night. So being able to take these disparate data sets of here's the transactions that are coming through the authorization system, through MasterCard, through Visa, etc. And here's the batch jobs we're running in our mainframe platform, and overlaying the times of the batch jobs every night on something like this to show if it's between these two jobs here and there's a peak, don't worry about it. Okay, and being able to set up our alerts around that as well. And you can see we can start to look at things like, where people are spending in e-commerce or whether they're dipping or tapping or swiping the card, and really starting to see some trends around that, starting to see some trends around, is Apple Pay being taken up in the region, or are people signing up for it and never actually using it, which is one of the trends that we sort of saw. Seeing things that, again, as Chris said, bringing up a map like this, and seeing in the last 15 minutes where the 6 million cardholders that you've got in your system around the world, where they're spending. What are they spending on? Okay? Are they being declined? Seeing a chloropleth map of the entire world where every transaction that gets declined for fraud starts to make one country glow a little bit redder and a little bit redder and a little bit redder. So now you've got a map up on the wall in your risk department that you can look at really quickly and say, hang on a minute, something's happening in Venezuela. All right, which you may not have been able to pull out so easily. So really starting to take the data that we're using to make sure that the networks were up, to make sure that we were giving our clients as good a service as we could possibly do. Really, the business case, as Chris alluded to, was to make sure that we never got a phone call from our clients saying, hey, things are wrong, and that was the first time that we'd heard about it. Okay, that's what we put it in for. What we ended up with was a portfolio analysis tool that we use and we give to our clients as well to use.
Yep. Just quickly on that last map one. That was one of my, this was after I did a Splunk Live where I saw this map visualization for the first time, and there was a live demo using the IP lock that then mapped, put onto the map. I'm going, oh, that's fantastic. I wish I had that kind of data with what I got. And that's where I went and found the use case of going and grabbing that merchant city. There is no location data in an authorization. So I was using merchant city and country really to play with this visualization, but I had no use case. I was building it because it was some dashboard porn. But we've actually
Splunk fanatic.
Trademarked. We've actually used this in a real life scenario. Is that when you're getting hit with those bin range attacks, you're hitting the credit card numbers one after the other because the expiry dates for a client were in order. Even if 1% get through, that's a huge hit of fraud. So just quickly, a show of hands, did anybody go to the MasterCard presentation this morning on preventing fraud? No, just me. Doing just those high volume of transactions, and he was talking about the fraud situation. If your card gets hit by fraud, they go and shut down your card, right? And you can't use that card anymore. If you're traveling, which I am, I've come out here from Melbourne, I'm a week and a half away from getting a new plastic. What we did within our system is we've actually been able to lock down the areas of fraud so that we don't have to shut down that card. So you've been hit with fraud, okay, great. How's that card going to be hit with fraud? And they're going to be using it on Amazon. They're going to be using it to buy Bitcoin. They're going to be going to online web video services. All the things, you can go and lock all those down without impacting your customer. So you can say, do you know what, bro, your card's been hit with fraud and we can see it's being used online.
It's obviously not you.
What we're going to do, he goes, oh, I'm travelling. No worries, what we're going to do is we're going to put it on so that now no e-commerce, okay? You can only use card present with PIN verification. Rohit can go and buy his coffee and buy his lunch while he's here, and when he gets back to Melbourne, goes, now I'm ready for my new plastic. So we're able to do that in exactly that situation. We're seeing this fraud hit, and go, great, we can see it's online merchants, great. I don't want to shut down all online merchants. Looking at this graph, where are they happening? It's America. Whereabouts in America? It's happening in Illinois, it's happening in Chicago. What's happening in Chicago? How about we lock down Chicago, as a rule, we put it there on the whole platform. Now we're only impacting less than 1% of our customers without having to go and do reissues of plastics. So we've actually used this in real world, and I get the question, when would I use that? And you don't know when you're going to use it until you need to use it. It might be too late to build it.
So, and it's interesting, Chris talked earlier about how he sort of like tries to get his day job over and done with and then goes and plays with it. Some of the guys he's got working for him as well, he's given them this kind of wandering duck capability where one day a week or 20% of their time, just go and find something. Go and find something that's interesting. And I think where we fail with getting adoption of Splunk in the industry is by using it, or in your organisation, is it's used very specifically by a specific group. And really, to get it to work, you need to get multiple groups buying in on it, okay? And you really can't just have it living in your IT department. You can't just have it living in one particular area who happens to be monitoring, you saw the video, we use it to see whether our websites are up. If it's controlled by that one group, then that's all it will ever be used for. So you need to actually get out there and tell the rest of the organisation what you're using it for, and they can suddenly go, well, if they can do that, then we can look for this and we can look for that. So as another example, looking at invisible payments, one of our clients, if you look at credit cards these days and look at even your own statement for credit cards, in the olden days of 5 years ago, you probably only had 3 or 4 transactions on your statement every month that you didn't actually make a conscious choice to use the card. You think about loyalty, giving you points every time you pull out your Citibank card versus your HSBC card. Think about all of the transactions that hit your card today that you have had no choice in the actual time that you had the transaction. Think about your Uber transactions and your Netflix and your gym membership and your insurance payments and all of these transactions that hit your credit card that you made a choice 6 months ago, 2 years ago as to what card you're going to use. Okay? So that's changing the way our financial institutions are looking at doing loyalty. Okay? So just because trying to incent people to use their plastics is not working for the volumes. But it's also creating an issue when your card is lost and you have to get a replacement card number. Now you have to call 55 institutions and do that replacement. Okay, and that's a huge problem. So one of our banks was looking at saying, well, what if we had a service whereby when we did a lost stolen replacement for our customers, they could go through a checklist and go, yeah, I use Netflix, yeah, I use Amazon Prime, yeah, I use Airbnb, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and we could go and replace that card number for them in a secure way. Wouldn't that be an awesome service? So they wanted to see if anybody was interested, and they thought, well, how many people are losing money because they have the old details? So they came to us and said, is there any way of working out how many organisations are losing money and which ones are losing the most money because they have the wrong card details? I'd just like to point out that we've basically spoofed the names of these organisations. So this is not real data, or it is real data, but it's not real company names. So we've just kind of mixed them around and made them interesting. So if anyone's from any of these organisations, please be aware that this is not real data. But really what we were able to look at is basically choosing, as at last night, jumping on and looking at, well, who's had a declined amount that's really large and what percentage of their transactions are being declined, and then once you click on them, opening up the graph next door and saying, well, what percentage of transactions are declined because the card numbers were incorrect. And this gave them a tool that they could play with for a couple of weeks and work out which organisations they would go and target and have this conversation with. So being able to create these kind of ad hoc, on-the-fly type dashboards for our clients, over and above just how fast is the network running and are we getting alerted? To be clear, we're absolutely using it for exactly those other use cases as well. We're using the predictive alerts to find out whether the transactions per second, in the next 2 hours are going to drop below the transactions per second that they were at the same 15-minute period last Sunday, so that we are getting these alerts to find out whether our systems are running okay, but really turning them then into real-time data and turning them into the conversation where we're having conversations around what else is really what's important. And I'll let Chris go through this, but before I do, I'll just say, you need to know the data that you're looking at. Okay, so you can't just grab someone who's a Splunk expert and say, here's a credit card system, go and tell me who the most profitable customers are. because they don't know which fields in the credit card system indicate that somebody's profitable. So you need to take someone with data analytics skills and someone who understands the platform and what data's stored where, and the fact that a commercial card looks different from a consumer card and an Amex card looks different from a Visa card, and the fact that these particular fields are in Thai baht and these are in New Zealand dollars, to be able to put that information together. So again, it's combining these skills across multiple teams.
So yeah, really pulling that together. How did we get there? How did we see that that this process worked? Really, Splunk is the top of the pyramid. We've got the platforms, we've got the data, we just weren't accessing that data. So really, the top of the pyramid is that world-leading visualization tool in Splunk. And that was announced this morning, general availability of version 8. It actually got released yesterday. I raised all my Jira tickets for our internal instances to go up to it because I want to play with all the new visualizations and drags and drops. But next under that is getting that system understanding. It was said this morning, every company now is a software company. It's in Australia, four largest banks, four of the biggest companies in Australia, and they've all got the largest IT divisions of any company in Australia. They're all technology companies. They're not actually banks anymore. So in doing this, when you're running within your company, you're not taking off-the-shelf software. So you will for the Workday for your HR system and Jira for your ticketing system, but you've got so many internally built systems and platforms and DevOps creating logs. You need to have that understanding of that system of what data do you have access to that you could be pushing in. So when we went and put it in, we had all that core data, and we went through, great, what all the data I've got for an authorization. And went through every field by field. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to send it to Splunk so I've got it there for later, and I'll find a use for it later. So merchant description. I didn't need merchant description for doing my outage alerts and TPS and anomaly detection and decline rates. But I'll put it in there because I might find a use for it later. And you've seen a couple of use cases where we've been able to play with that data. So getting access, not just having your guys building your alerts and monitoring your platforms. You actually need to get the guys who understand the system to decide the data that should go in there. So don't keep them separate. Make sure that you're getting those two together. Your industry experience. Okay? So don't just use your developers. Okay? Well, you're never going to use merchant description. You don't need the MCC, merchant category code, that says that it's a veterinary clinic versus a coffee shop versus a supermarket. You don't need that for reporting. But your industry guys, if you've got your architects and you've got your business teams, they're going to go, actually, that's a key bit of data that you want to get in there because we can find some good uses for using that data. So get your system experts, but also get your industry expertise in there, okay? And having a view of that bigger picture. Okay? So understanding where you're trying to get to, where you're not just talking about what data you've got now and what you're monitoring now. Where do you want to be? Okay? So you can see where Matt and I are talking today. We're in our keynote this morning, and we're talking about where do we want to be next. And having a view of where you want to be helps you decide what data you're going to pull in and what you're going to load on.
And just, Chris, on the bigger picture as well, start thinking about what you know across two departments, across two customers, across two areas that is more important than knowing just within one. So if you can see, if you're processing whatever you're doing, manufacturing, whatever it is, on behalf of multiple clients or multiple departments within your organisation, you can see more processing for multiple than they can see themselves. So for us, potentially a bank could build the same kind of visualization tools that we build ourselves, but they can't see the bigger picture and how they relate to our other 4,500 clients that we process for. So an example of in one region, we had a large number of clients who were all declining about 3.5% of transactions. And we had one client that was declining 5.5% of transactions. Okay? Now they had no way from inside the fence, if you like, or inside the bubble of knowing how they compared to everybody else. So think about it across your organisation as well. The more departments you bring in, the more customers that you have on, the wider, the bigger that picture is. the more possible cases that are there, and the more value that you're adding just by getting that bigger picture view.
And finally, that community of code. What we went as we went and built our big enterprise solution for Splunk, made sure we were getting everybody in the same spot, because we didn't want to have 9 different Splunk instances. I wanted one Splunk instance to rule them all, which meant that I can correlate between those systems and between those that data. I don't know why yet later, but I'll find a use for it. But it also meant all of that code was on the same place. All that SPL, all of the JavaScript, all of the visualizations, you can go and pick up from one and use in another. So the HR departments in there, they can grab a dashboard widget and example SPL out of the ones that I've built for credit cards. As I keep saying, good programmers code from scratch. Good programmers borrow from other developers. Great programmers steal outright. It's gone to sleep. Speaking too much on one slide. Had this nicely animated. My animations have disappeared on a Mac. So how do we get there? So step number 1, I'm guessing if you're at comp, you've already done step 1. You've already got the platform, already using it. I can't imagine there's too many people doing assessments on the product that are in here. You're here to talk about how do I get use out of what I've got today. But start by solving a real problem. Okay, so you're not monitoring your platform. You need a SOC, you need a NOC. You're looking to monitor uptimes. That's your major use case. That's how you get it in the door. That's how you get it past procurement. Okay, so you're solving that issue to start with. Okay. 2, also when you're building, you're going to get a lot of, okay, I've now got this platform. What do you want to see? I don't know. What you got? I don't know. What can you do? So you kind of actually need to start and play with it and put together some example dashboards that you can put in front, saying, "Well, here is an example of what I can do." As Steve Jobs' quote that I love, and I use nearly every presentation: "A customer doesn't know what they want until you show them." And only then they'll go, that's good, but what I actually want is. Okay? So you've got to put something there up to start with. Okay? Next, you've got to engage your experts. Okay? So the way that we did it, we didn't go and build a Splunk team and now go and talk to the rest of the teams. We took the existing teams that were already knowing the platform and we taught them Splunk. Did the other way around. So then they could see what the platform could do. They could then decide what data was going to go in there and what needed to be monitored and get them defining their own metrics that were what were important for them. Okay? Getting that industry knowledge. Okay? So once you've got those examples of the data that you're processing and what it's capable of, you can then get that industry knowledge overlay. As Matt and I we're talking about pin decline rates, and we know if you're somebody who doesn't know authorizations and credit card, looking to go, that decline rate's a problem. Matt and I are looking to go, no, that's not a problem. That's recurring payments. That's a Netflix dumping a batch file on us through batch to online APIs. Don't worry about it. You do see a peak when that happens. So you will get your anomalous results unless you've got that industry knowledge to overlay over the top of it. Okay. Get that feedback, okay? So again, we were going off and building everything internally and uses for what we had as our organisation, and we were processing. We're doing a bureau service, but our clients had a very different view around how they see the same business, and we're doing the same work. So we were building and all for our internal purposes, and then we display to the client and they go, do you know what you are missing? What information I'd like to see, what was important as a metric for my business, and you're able to get that and augment that alternate view. Okay. Lastly, it's really after you've built it all, you've got all that data in, you need to give you guys time to play. So I've hired a number of people in my team, and when I hired them, I said, right, you're going to do 4 days worth of work for me, the things that I need you to do. You're going to be building dashboards, you're going to be raising alerts, you're going to be doing the admin, you're going to be doing your role definitions, okay? 1 day a week, I want you to go out there and find something interesting for me, okay? find something I don't know. Tell me something I haven't seen. Okay? And so I get a report that goes out every week. Here is something interesting I found. 3 or 4 graphs and a bit of analysis and history and trend. And I go, oh wow, I never realised that.
And really important, that's not just going to Chris. The audience for that report gets wider and wider because the more cool things that people see that you can do with it, the more they trigger, oh, well, if you can do that, then why can't you do this? And this is part of the thing as well. It's really driving that communication of what you're doing, not just keeping it in your team from the point of view of building it and running it in your team, but not keeping your wins in the team either. Hey, we've got a new visualization that does this and it saves us this much money, or it finds these kind of problems. Shout it from the rooftops, right? Some people won't care, but some people will see that and go, that's really anomalous to this other problem I have over here, which might be a totally different part of the organisation, but you really got to get that communication out there.
Yep. So we're on a bit of a communication, we're on the communication team for Splunk internally at FIS, and as Matt said, whenever a problem came up, there was 3 answers to it, and Splunk was usually one of them. We've got a problem here. Can Splunk do it for us? Right? So we've got it there. We've put it all across all of our core platforms, all of our system mission-critical platforms, and making sure we're running our business as efficiently and as effectively with the highest availability possible. Okay? But that's when what I call the off-prescription use cases came along. Right? And now that I've got that, now I've got the skills and we know what the platform can do, we started putting in a whole heap of data that's got nothing to do with any of those purposes. Right? So we started using it, pulling in all of our timesheets, right? Making sure, checking the projects that have been approved and the budgets that have been approved, and then correlating that to timesheet systems. Right? And now we're doing profitability analysis against our projects. Which ones are under budget? Which ones are over budget? Which ones got approved and are supposed to start 3 months ago, but nobody's billed any time to them? So we're able to follow these up and say, you said you were going to start on that project, but nobody spent any time on it. Right? And you need to go and use that budget. Right? The other one is that we've taken our change management system. Okay? So all enhancements that get raised by all clients would regularly we have an SLA of 10 days from the time that you define your requirements and give them to us to here is a full design and this is the release that's going to go in. Okay? But during the process, it always goes back and forward. Actually, I want to change that requirement. Can I drop this? And regularly we get some issues, but they take a little bit longer because you go through that process flow. Going and looking at change ticket, anybody uses Jira, why has this defect been outstanding for a month? And well, it's gone through, it's not been sitting there on somebody's plate for a month. It was actually, work was being done all the way through. But it's really hard to see that when you go through the change history, through the R&D comments. Right? We're pulling Jira in, we're pulling our change management systems in, and now you've got a dashboard. You can go and have a look at any change ticket and any problem ticket and click on it and bring it up, and now you've got a pie graph. How much time was spent in each status and how many times were you in each status? So you can have that conversation with the client and say, I'm really sorry that it's taken 20 days for that design, but it's really only been in design for 3 days. We spent 17 days talking about your requirements and clarifying your requirements. All of a sudden, you've got that information to hand to have that conversation at the touch of a button, rather than I'm going to have to go process the change log and work out where that time was spent. Okay? I think key to that is people, all of the systems, they all process in numbers and row entries, and that's not how people think. Then when you look at a table with numbers, it's only when you apply your context to it that you kind of understand it. But as soon as you make it visual, immediately you can process it and understand it much more quickly. Okay? You can understand a pie graph or a bar chart much more quickly than you can process and understand a statistics table. So making everything visual. It's dashboards for every one of our systems, whether they're mission critical or just a back office system. We've got dashboards and reports to pull those together. Okay? So really, you've got so many opportunities for prescription use cases for Splunk that you could be using it for. So don't just think it's your SOC, it's your NOC, your reporting, monitoring, alerting. Have a look at any other data that you've got within your organisation that you might want to parse. Okay? Timesheet systems and change records. So go and play with that data and visualize teams that haven't even thought of it. Your finance team doesn't know what it is. They pay for it, but they don't know what it does. Yeah, make sure you get it out into those other areas of the organisation.
And other levels of the organisation as well. So a lot of our good ideas haven't come from the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. You've got to get rid of the highest paid person's opinion in the room, right? So it doesn't matter where you are. A lot of these ideas have come from a new grad. They've come from, somebody who happens to be, a tester who's been working away for many, many years and says, well, if you can do that, what about this? It comes from some of our international teams who we thought process-wise had quite a different approach to things to us. And they did, but they also had a different view of what we could do to fix as well. So make it as wide as you possibly can.
So really, you've got Splunk, you've got a world-leading visualization tool, your telescope, but if you're not pointing into the right data, you're missing the value of the platform. So make sure you're getting the data and getting the use out of what you're paid for. So, okay. That's all we've got covered. So do we have
10 minutes for questions.
Any questions? At the back here. Sorry, I don't have a mic. You're going to have to yell.
It's okay. I have two questions. First one is when you bring a new client on board into your organization, do you have like an onboarding process that is automated to basically create whatever back-end data records that way they can access the dashboard? Is that something that you guys have pretty much thought out and running?
Yes, I'll answer the first part of that. Yes, automated onboarding. So one of the things that we've done is that all of our system parameters we've actually pushed all those into Splunk as well. So when you go and define it to the back-end systems, they're in the daily feeds of the system parameters that then go up into Splunk as well, and that drives all of the drop-down lists and drives the profiles that are being created as well. So the user IDs that are there, they're all being federated up to the Splunk instances. So, yep, no config automatically added as a part of that onboarding process.
And as a starting point for the dashboards, we want the same set of dashboards for all the clients. Not because they all necessarily want to see the same things, but as a starting point, we want to be able to have that conversation to say, did you realise that you're different from everybody else? And that might be a good thing, that might be a conscious thing, but it may not be a conscious thing. And it gives us that ability to have that kind of conversation. And we do a lot of hosted solutions for our clients, which are running on-prem for us. We do a bunch of solutions for our clients where we sell the software and they run it in their own data center. And we're now thinking around, well, if we can get the cloud version of Splunk up and running, even those clients where we're not running it for them, we can start to see how they compare to our internal clients. And we can start to have conversations around, that patch we gave you last week, well, we don't think you applied it properly because we're seeing all these improvements across all of our internal ones. But because we have the same set of dashboards for those other clients, we have that comparison, that apples with apples kind of conversation.
And then the second question was, typically in large organizations, they have a business intelligence team. How do you validate the numbers that you're showing in your dashboard with that team? Because everyone kind of has sometimes a different view of how a number and contextually is arrived at. What's your process that you use to make sure everyone is in agreement with the numbers?
It's a good question, and we come across it a lot. I'll say two things. I'll say usually by the time it gets to the business intelligence team, certainly for banks and large banks, it's been normalised significantly, and we're dealing very much with real-time unnormalised data. So there are some discrepancies between it. I really see them as different tools. So our clients do have large data lakes where they've got long-term AI learning across them and they're trying to find long-term trends. One view we're really selling as a real-time, what's happening today, what's happening in the last 15 minutes, alerting and understanding tool. So we're typically not coming up with the same metrics as those teams. We're not trying to find the same numbers. And where we do, and they vary, it's usually within sort of reasonable amounts, and it's because they're normalizing stuff or they're adding things in differently or we're taking it at a slightly different time frame.
Time frame is that they're picking up from one batch to the next, and we're going from midnight to midnight. Yeah, absolutely, we're doing those, and we're doing the summarizations as well. I had almost exactly that question yesterday. Jira ticket got raised to me. Why is this number off by 7,000 from this number? Well, let me go and explain it to you. This is where it is, and this is why. And usually, this is why the Splunk number is correct, and you should be using that and not the one that you've got, because you're off and you've missed this record. Thank
you.
No worries.
You're welcome.
Any other? Oh, up the back here.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Second time I've seen that video.
Excellent. Sorry, just quickly on that. That was the same video I presented in Melbourne. I was kind of hoping that there was nobody from Melbourne in here and I could cheat and do one set of work and present it twice, but you've called me out.
Hey, just as a quick show of hands, how many people had seen Monty Python before? Because there's excellent.
Great.
Because there was a bit of a, it is America, but they are our people, they are our nerds, so they've probably seen it, but we'll see.
Yeah. Sorry, your question.
I have a question. So, obviously, you've mentioned saying, putting the use case to create Splunk to the organization, solve a knock issue or have a solve. The challenge that arises with a few other organizations is you put it in to solve the SOC issue, it's then a security product. How do you move that from a security tool to an enterprise tool?
Yep. And it's an excellent question, and that's exactly what we're saying. You need to make sure that doesn't happen. It's not so much of an easy answer, but usually when you're putting it in, for the first time, it is, we're going to go in with this one use case, and you'll get an individual instance. You're not even getting high availability. You're not getting the cluster deployment. I'm putting in on one server to monitor this one log, which is exactly what we did. But when we came along and we finally built that big use case, what we had in mind, what I had in mind, I knew that this was going to go crazy. 20 years in IT and financial services, I've never used a product like this. Getting it in, I've gone, now I need a big clustered environment that I can easily scale, because I'm going to add everybody else into it as well, because the more data I get in there that I can correlate, the better it's going to be for everyone. So hopefully, when these assessments are being made, that you can get those instances, the proper instance built for scale, that can then be driven and have rolled out across multiple use cases. But it really depends on how your IT department's structured. It's and the vision that your CIO or the CTO is putting on. I don't know how to help with that conversation, I'm sorry.
Well, and interestingly, Chris lives with PCI compliance breathing down his neck the whole time. So, with financial data, there's that extra level of you can't possibly let any information get out. So when it was built the first time, knowing that in the back of his mind, we didn't put any personalized data in there. Okay, so we deliberately designed it, even though it required a little bit of extra work at the time. We took out and we obfuscated a number of different fields. That meant that we knew we could then put it in places, make it available to departments, etc., that wouldn't necessarily have the same security access as the initial data that was in there, because we knew we were going to be giving it to the marketing department and the HR department. But that was really, the way to do it is assume that it's going to go to all those places when you're building that first instance, right? And so that you don't have to rebuild it to hand it out, and you don't have to have those conversations. Because once it's built and it's working, and you don't need a PAN in there, you can have a proxy that simulates for a PAN. Once you've built it and it's working, the conversation of saying, well, we want these guys to use it, the only thing that stops that, if it's already built, you don't have to spend any money on it, the only thing that stops that, if there's something in there that they can't see. So don't put anything in there that you don't have to put in there, but put everything in there that you can put in there safely, because you never know what you want to use tomorrow either.
I thought I saw one more. Here we go, sorry, up the back here.
Couple more.
You mentioned that you share some of your visualizations with your own customers.
Share them with?
You share with external entities outside of your company. Was there a process in helping management let an internal tool be seen by outsiders?
No, no. For the most part, I was presenting and collaborating a lot with our clients. And I don't know why, but FIS encourages that for some reason. Which has been fun, actually, because I walk in and I'm having a chat to the guys who are using IronStream on the mainframe. So I don't know if anybody's got IronStream or SyncSorts in here. Just if you've got a mainframe, amazing product, delighted with it. But it's driven a lot of that collaboration. And I think what's key in that collaboration is that it's non-competitive. Okay? I'm not giving away any FIS trade secrets, and it's more for the benefit of the industry rather than, this is a competitive advantage for us as an organisation. So very much like Splunk Answers is out there to improve that larger community.
But take it across the departments as well, right? So the IT production support department wanted all of these things so that they never got called for a problem that they didn't know about. But then client services department said, well, if our clients can actually see these dashboards, we don't even get called to find out what's going on. So we get rid of the call altogether. We get rid of 5 people sitting in a war room for 3 hours only to find out that we didn't need to be there in the first place because it was, with the telco's problem or someone else. So, really getting those different teams involved and showing them, hey, we can do this. The other team's like, well, if you can do that, give it to the client because then we won't even get that phone call and that's going to reduce that. So again, it's this sharing everything you've got because you'll be surprised how many people say, that works for me too. So we had another question down the front here.
Just curiosity, how much do you guys index today? I mean, being able to put forward thinking of, I might use that eventually, that's something I'm having trouble getting leadership to buy into, where every log I put or data I put in, I need to have a use case to use it to justify that spend.
It's a great question. We've had the same thing, but again, when I went and asked, I told them how much data needed to go in there, so that the license was a little bigger, because I knew that I was going to send some more stuff in there that I actually didn't need to send in there. And finance department's not here, so. But yeah, I needed 20 gig, and I originally asked for 50, and I was like, oh, good, now I've got some breathing room before I have to go have a license expansion discussion. And that license expansion I can tie in for, well, we just got that big new client, so therefore I need to send more data in there and so on. That is a tough call, but what you can do, Splunk's been working a lot on that, the data stream processor, so that you can now go and collapse that heavy forwarders so you can reduce the amount of data before they get indexed. And I believe licensing is now moving away from the gigabyte-based licenses. So have a chat to your Splunk rep around what options do I have for getting more data in there and not costing me more money. Okay. I think I might have been the last one, so we're about to get kicked out. So
when you're selling the product to a company and they're going to manage it themselves, what's the best support model of use that you see? Just like security has got it first, so they're the admins? Is there a Splunk admin group, or how do you?
Again, go to everybody. Get everyone in the room because internally they'll have that conversation. If you go to the security guys first and they go, we can't afford it, or we don't have the capacity, we don't have whatever, we can maybe afford about 80% of it. Thanks, but no thanks. But if you get them and the business owners and the client service reps and the people who own the portfolio, get them all in the room at the one time. Or if you need to, have a number of conversations and then tell them that you're talking to the other groups. Because seriously, the same thing, they will combine their budgets to be able to get that, and they will see that, well, I have some interest in that. So cast your net as wide as you can.
Yeah. So fortunately, when we're setting it up, I had a fairly small organisation that's grown quite large with that. I didn't set it up as an IT ops team. I actually said, and now give me the Splunk team because we're going to be putting it everywhere. So I've actually got a separate Splunk team that do those admin functions, but at the same time, we're not doing it for all the other teams. They're getting in there, they're defining their own alerts, they're defining their own dashboards, they're doing everything, but the actual admin function sits within what we've created as a separate Splunk team. So, yeah. Okay. Good.
Just to step on the last part, when you got the Splunk team, when you extend it out to the business, you end up getting your indexes equal to stars and
Yeah.
massive queries.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that add an extra workload on your team, not necessarily for management?
It does, but we've gone and actually done some. We're actually got searches that are summarising data on the searches. So I keep a track of every single search that's done by every user, and I'm tracking those real times. And I'm tracking those index equals stars because we're coming after them with a hammer. Yeah, now with Splunk, I think the search history rolls off within 7 days or results. I then go and summarise that data and put it into a summary index so that I can go do that backwards looking 2 months ago. It was Sean that was the problem. Sean, you got to stop doing this. So I've got that analysis. Again, save some data that I can use to play with later. So, okay, thank you everybody for your time today.
Thanks, guys.